Getting life insurance on artists. You praying on his death.
There was a death/jail clause in my contract, which stated that if one of us died or if one of us went to jail, that we could replace that member, but at a lower percentage rate.
They're putting out life insurance on these young kids now because they're gambling on you to do some dumb so they can profit after you die. This is getting ridiculous.
The level of evil that's involved by even thinking of a plan like this, you know what I'm saying?
You know, don't be letting these labels put a life insurance policy on you because your ass, you know, a lot of these labels got ties to the streets, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it ain't nothing. It ain't nothing
To get your
knock
ass
you off your feet,
banged
you know what I'm
on.
saying? Yeah, it ain't nothing.
In the modern music industry, the death of an artist often marks the beginning of a new, unsettling chapter in their legacy. No longer merely a tragic end, these passings are increasingly transformed into lucrative brands. As the industry finds ways to turn these losses into profit, we see a shift in how legacies are managed. From posthumous albums to holographic performances, the ethical and cultural implications reveal a story of creativity clashing with commerce, of art being transformed into an asset. In this world, death becomes a commodity, and the legacy of the artist is often overshadowed by the lure of profit. I've thought about this a lot, and I wanted to dive into the complex mix of motivations behind these albums, the ethical questions that they raise, and their impact on both the fans and the artist's legacy. By breaking down the practices and motivations that drive posthumous releases, I hope to shine a light on the fine line between homage and exploitation. This isn't just about music. It's about respect, consent, and the true value of an artist's work. To fully understand the predatory nature of posthumous releases, it is necessary to discuss the history of record labels and how their evolution has influenced current practices. The origins of record labels trace back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a time when the burgeoning music industry began to formalize the production and distribution of music. Early labels like Columbia Records and Victor Talking Machine Company, which later became RCA Victor, were pioneers, focused on capturing and selling the sounds of the era. Initially, the primary goal of these labels was to bring music to the masses, a noble endeavor that facilitated cultural diffusion and artistic expression. However, as the industry evolved, so did its motives. The initial altruistic intent to share music gradually morphed into a more commercial focus. The introduction of new technologies such as vinyl records, cassette tapes, CDs, and eventually digital formats expanded the reach of record labels, but also intensified the competitive nature of the business. With greater market reach came greater profit potential, and the priorities of these companies began to shift accordingly. In the early days, record labels acted as gatekeepers, discovering and nurturing talent and providing the resources necessary for artists to produce and distribute their work. While this relationship was symbiotic in many ways, it also laid the groundwork for power imbalances. Jumping ahead to modern day for a second, although it wasn't much different in the past, the dominance of a few major record labels, Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, and Warner Music Group, exacerbates these issues. These three companies control about 80% of the global music industry, consolidating power and influence over the market. This concentration allows them to dictate terms to artists, often leading to unfair contracts and exploitative practices. In the past and the present, contracts were often skewed in favor of the labels, leaving artists with limited control over their own music and financial returns. Over time, the predatory aspects of the industry became more pronounced, and this was done in so many ways. Everything from, but not limited to, of course, the obvious one, botched contracts. There is also lack of transparency, lots of baiting and switching, and taking full creative control from their artists. Chuck Berry, the legendary rock and roll musician, faced significant challenges due to his record label contracts. His early contracts with Chess Records in the 1950s were notorious for offering minimal royalties and demanding ownership of the music. Berry received a fraction of the profits generated by his massive hits. Additionally, Chess Records would sometimes list songs under other writers' names to circumvent paying Berry full royalties. By the late 20th century, these practices had become deeply entrenched. Prince's battle with Warner Brothers in the 1990s epitomizes the struggle of many artists against exploitative record labels. Despite his immense success, Prince felt trapped by a contract that he likened to slavery.
The reason why it became such a big deal back then is ever since my third album, I wasn't really taking large advances from the recording companies. I was recording the albums myself in my own studio. So the way I looked at it, I owned the work because I paid for it. And I did all the work. I created it, so I felt like it should belong to me. That said, the companies felt otherwise, and they would always hold this contract up and say, well, you signed it. And I say, well, I understand that. It's not like I want to leave. I just want to, talk about this thing and see if we can't make it more fair. Of course, they wouldn't change, because if they changed, they wouldn't really exist. And that's kind of the situation we're in right today. They're not going to exist much longer. But it's not like we're against them or anything like that. The idea is that we find better ways of working with one another. It shouldn't be a situation where they own the album or the work. We're talking about intellectual copyright. If they're going to be indeed a delivery service, then that's fine. But even FedEx doesn't say that they own the thing that they ship.
The contract limited his creative freedom and ownership of his music, leading him to famously change his name to an unpronounceable symbol and write slave on his face during performances to protest his treatment. This drastic move was a statement against Warner Brothers' control over his work and his identity. The transition from altruistic intentions to boardroom bully behavior wasn't a quantum leap, but it certainly wasn't a slow crawl either. I'd label it as a trot, or an enthusiastic skip into being a greedy D-bag. In the 1970s, Tom Petty signed a terrible deal with Shelter Records, which locked him and his band into an unfair contract with low royalties and absolutely no creative control. When MCA Records bought Shelter, Petty's contract transferred to them. Frustrated, Petty declared bankruptcy in 1979 to escape the deal. The highly publicized legal battle forced MCA to renegotiate, eventually giving Petty better terms and more control. While record labels were not created with inherently predatory intentions, the pressures of capitalism and the pursuit of profit gradually steered the industry towards exploitative practices. Today, this is most starkly illustrated in the handling of posthumous releases, where the legacy of artists is managed with a primary focus on commercial gain, rather than respecting their creative wishes and personal dignity. Circling back to Prince, he famously fell victim to this. The exploitation did not end with his death in 2016. Despite his clear wishes to retain control over his music, the release of posthumous albums by Warner Brothers continued, driven by the label's desire to capitalize on his enduring popularity. Prince was certainly not alone. Posthumous releases have existed long before the establishment of modern record labels, though the nature and extent of such releases have evolved significantly over time. In the pre-record label era, the concept of posthumous releases largely revolved around written compositions rather than recorded music. Classical composers like Johann Sebastian Bach, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig van Beethoven had their works published and performed after their deaths. These posthumous releases were typically managed by the composer's family, patrons, or publishers. With the advent of recording technology in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the scope of posthumous releases expanded. Early record labels began to preserve and distribute recordings of deceased artists. In the mid to late 20th century, posthumous releases became common. Jim Morrison, the legendary frontman of The Doors, has had his share of posthumous drama that people still talk about to this day. Specifically, 7 years after his death in 1971, An American Prayer was released. And this was quite different from what fans had known of the icon. Some fans viewed Different as great. It was something fresh from an artist they loved and lost. But many side-eyed this release, as it was a spoken word poetry album. If you write poetry, I'm one of those people, you know how deeply personal your writing is. It can be raw and emotional, and sometimes it can be just plain shitty. Whatever the reason, many poems written do not get shared. Jim Morrison recorded these in private, and I cannot fathom my personal poetry being distributed to the masses after I pass on. I can see the critical point of view crystal clear, but I can also say, in my opinion, the intent was genuine, at least on his estate's behalf. I do believe they thought of it as a meaningful tribute. The surviving members recorded music to accompany the poetry, which was very thoughtful. And also, while looking at other artists' posthumous discography and comparing Jim Morrison's to them, yeah, this seems as genuine as posthumous releases can be, intent-wise, again. I'll get into an overall positive example later, but just put a pin in that. I mentioned the comparing. Let's talk about those juiced up posthumous discographies out there. Tupac Shakur and Elvis Presley are two iconic figures in music history, with incredibly prolific posthumous discographies. Tupac, a groundbreaking rapper and poet, has had more albums released after his death than during his lifetime. Elvis Presley, widely considered the king of rock and roll, has an even more staggering posthumous discography. Since his death in 1977, an extraordinary number of albums have been released. The exact number may vary, depending on the criteria used to define an album: studio albums, compilations, live recordings, etc., etc. But the total clearly exceeds 40 distinct releases. That is nuts. The relentless stream of new Elvis music after he passed highlights how his legacy is constantly leveraged, sometimes to the point of commodifying his artistry. Both artists' posthumous releases do underscore their lasting influence and the efforts to keep their music alive. However, the continuous flow of their work also presents ethical dilemmas about how unreleased material is handled. Consent and profit over respect being the major concerns, and those still remain an issue to this day. Whether driven by genuine respect for the artist or blatant commercialism, the motivations and methods behind these releases continue to spark debate among fans, critics, and industry insiders alike. Further compounding these issues, French Montana has alleged that record labels are exploiting their artists in even more insidious ways by taking out life insurance policies on them.
Beefing for real, like people was like dying and this and that, and they're just like, it was blocking a lot of money. People don't want to touch you. You know what I'm saying? You know, your rap friends, somebody gets shot, your rap friends stop picking up, the label stop picking up. Nah, it gets crazy. You know what I'm saying? It gets crazy. But now it's even crazier because they getting life insurance on artists. At least back then we didn't have that.
Somebody told me that shit. Is a label signing an artist in good faith if you're taking a life insurance out of them?
No, you praying on his death. You praying on making millions on his death.
Or are they being realistic though?
Both. They're being realistic, and they, you're supposed to have life. You know what I'm saying? Life insurance anyway. But when the label does it, if you don't have one, that's crazy.
This practice, which Montana revealed during an interview with DJ Academics, suggests that labels are financially incentivized by the death of their artists, viewing them as more valuable dead than alive. Hi, let's pretend like I don't look totally different and that the lighting isn't awful. I'm in my living room, and I have several things I want to add. Starting with this French Montana interview, I was definitely very skeptical when I first watched it. I feel like even a know-nothing nobody like myself can understand that this really isn't that crazy. This is a business, and not just any business. This is the record label industry. The music market size is estimated at $30.7 billion. That is 30.7 billion reasons to light their ethics on fire. And with that in mind, a record label taking out life insurance on one of their artists or a death clause in their contract doesn't really feel that far-fetched. Still, I wanted to dig deeper, and I found myself perusing USC Gould's Business Law Digest, as one does on a wild Friday night, and I found a very illuminating article from Dawson J. Sanders titled The New 27 Club, Label, Legacy, and the Law. In it, Dawson shares, quote, "While musicians are dying younger, they are still leaving behind large bodies of incomplete or unreleased work. Grade A Productions, for example, claims to possess 3,000 unreleased songs recorded by Juice WRLD prior to the artist's death in 2019. Later, he shares another little nugget of interesting information. Lil Peep's mom, Liza Womack, filed a lawsuit against First Access Entertainment for negligence and wrongful death. Womack alleged that FAE played a role in her son's overdose by forcing him onto stage after stage, in city after city, plying and propping him up with illegal drugs. She also claimed that FAE, quote, undertook the task of controlling and managing R's. R, if you don't know, is Lil Peep's real last name. His name is Gustav Elijah R. Getting back to his mother's claim, this controlling and managing included his eating, drinking, sleeping, drug use, personal safety, and access to healthcare and therapists. The LA County Superior Court did say that this was fit for trial, but Womack and FAE decided to settle for an undisclosed amount in 2023. Michael Jackson's estate actually sued Michael Jackson's recording company as well. This was in 2013. And after that lawsuit, there was rumblings in the business about an artist suspension clause. That was definitely not a perfect solution. Basically, if an artist was not taking care of themselves, labels and trustees could temporarily suspend that artist. That did not happen, and it's been crickets on a possible solution to this issue since. Which is so odd, don't you think? Because we have seen a plethora of young artists lose their life. You'd think that would re-spark conversations about a potential solution again, but guess not. Why make the health and well-being of your product a top priority when you know that alive they are a cash cow, but if they die, then they're a cash whale? If a label implements this suspension clause, they are putting their product on a shelf, causing not only a loss of money, but a loss of public interest as well. Letting an artist loose and maybe even allegedly potentially supplying their vices is far more lucrative. That, of course, brings us back to what the labels decided would be their solution, the death clause. If I understand the article correctly, I may not have. These death clauses can also be labeled as general contingency purpose arrangements. Or rather, the death clause can fall under that general purpose contingency arrangement, which is so crazy. Regardless, these are basically in every major record label deal now. The cause clause/arrangement is to, quote, anticipate and address potential problems that may arise during the ordinary course of recording, promoting, or distributing an artist's music. The label may also purchase a policy that, if the artist dies for any reason, pays the label an amount potentially greater than that which it would have made had the artist not died. I apologize if you hear any purring or snorting. My cat has found his way into my lap. He's very needy. He's precious. He looks so small here. Who's this skinty little boy? Who's the sweetest boy? Now you have an idea of what I'm working with here. Okay, say goodbye. So, if an artist dies, the label could get a potential life insurance payout and also have all this unreleased or unfinished work by that artist that they can continue to release for God only knows how long. That is basically a gold mine. Switching gears, I found some very concerning information, not necessarily regarding an artist's death, but this was information I felt was relevant and important to share nonetheless. I want to preface this with this is all alleged. This got kind of scary the more I learned. I don't think anyone really gives a shit about me or my channel, but I got nervous and just in case. CYA and all that, I don't want any smoke with anybody. I am just a goofy little redhead with a cat in her lap in her living room talking nonsense. I know nothing. To just jump right into it, the relationship between record labels and the themes of the music they promote, as well as their investments into private prisons, has apparently been a topic of discussion for a very long time. I did not know this information. I had no idea. Call me stupid, call me ignorant, call me living under a rock. I knew about, promoting more destructive lyrics was a possibility for numerous reasons, but the investment into private prisons? Oh my goodness. Many argue that record labels have historically nudged artists, especially in rap and hip hop, towards creating music, as I mentioned, with more destructive themes. Critics, of course, say this is to sell records, as I mentioned earlier, and perhaps more insidiously, drives higher incarceration rates, benefiting those with investments in the private prison industry.
Same people who own the labels own the prisons.
Literally the same people?
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons. It seems really kind of suspicious, if you want to say that word, that the records that come out are really geared to push people towards that prison industry.
But they didn't make you write those lyrics.
It's not about making somebody write the lyrics. It's about being there as guardrails to make sure certain songs make it through and certain songs don't. Certain flavors are exposed on the record. Some records are made by committee, meaning record company guys sit around and tell the artists, this is hot, say that, do this. We're gonna have this guy write the lyrics. The narrative is, structured and really made to what the record company want the record to be. Telling you what songs to sing, what hooks to do, what songs, you can do your song, that's fine. That's an album cut. But the single is what we all say is the single. You have the record company pushing the narrative. This to me is, some social engineering going on here to make sure those prisons stay full.
Prison is one of those things that should not be in private hands. They should not be run by people for profit. If by that you mean that the people who run the record companies may have stock in prisons, private prisons, that's possible. Do they actually Monday, Tuesday go to work as a record company executive and Wednesday through Friday go to work at the prisons? No.
They're not actually running the labels.
They have financial interest in it.
They have financial interest.
Okay, so if they have financial interest in the prisons, and your theory, if I'm following correctly, is that the kind of stuff in rap lyrics works as a funnel to get people inspired to do the kind of things that would get them in prison.
This echoes what many in the industry believe, that there is a deliberate push to exploit negative stereotypes for financial gain. Reports have shown that some of the major investors, Vanguard and BlackRock specifically, you may know about them and all of their ethical behavior already, but if not, I certainly did not before this. They invest in many different things. What caught my attention was their investments in companies like CoreCivic and GEO Group. You can research these groups, Vanguard, BlackRock, GEO Group, and CoreCivic. It is illuminating in the darkest way. Ironic, I know, but GEO Group and CoreCivic are basically managing and running and operating detention centers, prisons, and jails. CoreCivic, I believe, is nationally, GEO Group is internationally, or maybe the other way around. And of course, they make their money per inmate. Put a pin in that. We're gonna connect those threads in just a moment. The music industry often promotes harmful messages because they know it lines their pockets quite well. And sadly, this has become a horrific cycle. Artists themselves have said they've felt pressure to conform to these destructive themes. So when we follow the money and then work backwards, I'm gonna do my best to explain this as clear as possible. I apologize if it's messy, I'm doing my best. We start here. Private prisons, GEO Group, CoreCivic profiting off of mass incarceration. Investing in GEO Group and CoreCivic are Vanguard and BlackRock. So they're at the heart of this, or lack thereof, rather, and they have major stakes in record labels. Now, also keep in mind that there are 3 corporations that own 90% of the depiction of hip hop. 1, 2, 3. So record labels have a major financial interest in mass incarceration, which really does explain why they don't want to promote conscious or uplifting music. They know that music and lyrics influence the masses. So when they are nudging their artists to create music about violence, drugs, every crime under the sun, really, they are being incredibly insidious. And I think most of us recognize that the majority of rap and hip-hop artists, especially newer rap and hip-hop artists, are very young and or come from underprivileged backgrounds. So when a record label is handing this person a contract, promising them more money than they could ever imagine, they are obviously going to take advantage of that opportunity. It's life-changing for them. I don't blame them. And many of them probably don't even know how insidious these labels are. They may think they know. How many times have we heard when you're signing a record deal, you are signing your soul over to the devil? We've all heard that. But I can't imagine that many of these young people actually know what they are getting themselves into.
It's not enough for them to exploit our culture and make all the money off of it. Because let's keep it real, the industry has never been favorable towards the artist. Never. But they're going to go beyond the artist to get the artist to influence and lure in the consumer, which they knew at the time were mainly minorities. In other words, keep promoting gangster rap so that the youngsters will be influenced by them, which in turn will incite them to want to act like them. And it's a very good chance they'll end up in their prison. So they're getting paid twice. They're getting paid from the artists they signing, and then they're getting paid from the people that these artists influence that goes to prison trying to be like these artists.
To get ahead of something that may very well not be an issue at all that props up, just don't with the conspiracy theories. Not here. Take that to Reddit. That's not really the vibe I'm going for here. All of this is highly concerning, but not shocking. Not when I really sit and think about it. I know this is more of an adjacent issue, but I did really feel the need to share. It gives us a glimpse of how dark these record labels are. Dead or alive, these artists will be exploited. There is so much more to this and more to uncover, but truthfully, I'm just not smart enough to decode it and break it down. Staying on that truth train, even if I was, I don't know if I'd be comfortable doing so. I am not trying to be some hero or journalist. My content normally does not get this dark. There are so many great YouTubers I love to watch, that dedicate their entire channels to exposing these sorts of things. But that is not me, just in case this is the first video of mine you are watching. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. I simply mind my business and make my goofy ass content. I dug as deep as I care to. I was up all night looking into this. And then the following night, I did not let my brain recover, and I looked into just how many young musicians lost their life far too soon. Mostly I wanted to see how they lost their life. So I did my own sort of amateur survey. I found 100 musicians who passed at the age of 30 or younger across generations and genres. And I got some interesting results. Some things were certainly expected, others not so much. 10% passed in a motor vehicle crash. 11% of them took their own life. 12% passed in a plane crash. And another 12% were murdered. A whopping 36% passed due to drugs and alcohol. One of the most popular and well-known young musicians on this list is XXXTentacion, who was gunned down when he was only 20 years old. After his passing, XXXTentacion became even more popular, with a 1,603% increase in music sales across the US. Yes, 1,603. 1,603%. That is mind-boggling to me. Sadly, we know it is extremely lucrative to release things posthumously in the artist's memory, whether it's genuine or not. Projects like Biggie's Life After Death and Michael Jackson's Escape represent industry trends where album sales surge after an artist's passing. This phenomenon, known as the death effect, often leads to a surge in interest and value of an artist's work after their death. The abrupt end of an artist's career also sparks speculation and what-if scenarios about the potential future works they might have produced, elevating their status to legendary. This sense of lost potential makes their existing body of work even more precious. When Mac Miller passed away, his fans turned to his music, including the newly released Circles, as a way to cope with their grief and maintain a connection with him. I want to make it clear that not all posthumous releases are handled negatively, and Circles is a great example of this. It stands as a testament to respectful and thoughtful posthumous production. Miller was working on Circles as a companion piece to his album Swimming before he passed away. A producer that collaborated closely with Miller completed the album, ensuring it stayed true to Miller's artistic vision. Critics widely praised Circles for its introspective and authentic representation of Miller's growth and struggles, making it a fitting tribute that honors his legacy. Albums are not the only way to commodify an artist's legacy posthumously. In recent years, the advent of advanced technology has introduced another form of homage: posthumous hologram performances. These digital recreations allow fans to experience live performances from artists who have passed away, blending the nostalgia of their music with cutting-edge innovation. Yet these holographic spectacles have sparked a mix of wonder and controversy. One of the earliest and most iconic examples was Tupac's performance at Coachella in 2012. He performed Hail Mary and Two of America's Most Wanted alongside Snoop Dogg. While many fans were thrilled to see the legend perform again, others felt that it was disconcerting and even disrespectful. Then there was the 2014 Billboard Music Awards, where Michael Jackson's hologram drew significant attention. It showed remarkable technical prowess, but like with the Tupac hologram, it raised eyebrows, certainly in positive ways and less positive ways as well. Just like with posthumous album releases, this highlights the issue of consent. Imagine how you'd feel being a fucking laser light show, essentially, with someone else deciding your every move. The laser part of that actually sounds wicked cool, but regardless, there's a matter of respect. Is it about celebrating the artist's talent, or about cashing a check? So what can artists do? Is there anything an artist can do while they're alive to prevent exploitation when they pass on? I don't know for certain. I'm not a music industry insider, nor am I super familiar with entertainment law. I have basic common sense theories. Writing a very, very clear, detailed will with very specific instructions is a great start. Maybe even get it tattooed to secure your wishes even further. That is what Anderson .Paak did, by the way. That's how serious this is. Have someone you 200% trust manage your estate. If you don't trust anyone, get a professional. There's also, in addition to these things, not legal advice, by the way, any of this, maybe reconsider the label route. I understand the appeal of a record label contract, ka-ching, but the benefits from going the indie route could be more beneficial in the long run. By staying independent, artists retain full control over their music, image, and how their legacy is managed. They can release music on their own terms and ensure that their wishes are respected even after they pass away. The balancing act of honoring an artist's memory with the commercial interests that emerge is a very fine line to walk, leaving the question open. What's the best and most realistic way in our capitalist society to respect a musician's legacy while navigating those commercial aspects? I don't know if we will ever have a solution, but for now, as fans, we can support these efforts by respecting the artist's known wishes and critically evaluating posthumous releases. This conscious consumption helps to uphold the integrity of the artist's work, even after they are gone.